Hello, I'm Margaret Ewing, Director of Programs here at apexart, and I'm here today with Natasha yannacanedo, who has recently returned from spending a month in Jerusalem as an apexart fellow. And we're really happy to have you back and to get to hear about what your month has been like. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back.
So you got back 4 days ago?
Yeah, Sunday night, it's Thursday, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. So usually I like to start out by asking where your head was when you started on this journey, and more specifically when we told you you were going to Jerusalem. What was your reaction?
I was excited because it wasn't somewhere that I would ever think of really making an effort to go to. I'm not a religious person, so it's not something that would stand out for me in terms of traveling to. So I thought it was actually a really cool choice because it's something that I wouldn't normally do. And then here I was having this fellowship where I got to go to this place. So I was excited for it, and I didn't really know what to expect, but I was open to whatever, you know.
Great. And I forget when we told you before I even started here, so it was probably
I think I knew last summer. I feel like, and because I think what happened was I think I interviewed like April or May, and it was because I'm a professor, we needed me to go in June or July, and I think it was too quick to make it happen for last year, so it was a lot of waiting. And then there was we were in the process of adopting, but I didn't even mention anything because, you know, you could wait years, you don't know. And then we did get my daughter in January, and so I almost said, oh, I don't think I can do this, but my husband was really offended that I would actually not go because, of course, he could take care of our daughter, and so I was like, okay, and so I was able to still go.
Mm-hmm. Right, so about halfway through that preparation, like or anticipation, like your whole attention obviously shifted hugely to having a new baby. And which right when we saw you shortly before you were leaving and you told us, we were like, wow. And then it was like really impressive, I guess, that you felt like you could still go and
and I mean, it's
figured that out.
All thanks to my husband. Because I felt like, oh, I'm going to leave you I mean, you know, you're in survival mode when you have a newborn. And Amara had really bad colic. The first 3 months was hell. It was miserable. I was so sleep deprived. Even when I left, we were still sleeping in shifts. So I was just worried about him getting enough sleep, you know, and it wasn't so much that I thought I couldn't handle it. I mean, yes, of course I would miss her, but it was more I felt guilty because I was leaving my husband to do everything for a month. But he ended up, it was fine. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So that was probably like one of the most dramatic experiences for you, was going from being a new parent to suddenly like being on your own and having like all your time for yourself and all the schedule like designed around you, and like the fellowship is really designed to be like a very like personal experience.
I thought it was kind of ironic because I went from my daughter having complete control of my schedule to Devere having complete control of my schedule. So it was in some ways it was similar because it's you still don't really feel like it's your life is your own, but yes, there was time for me to like read a book, and there was time for it was about my experience, so it was very different. I mean, I have to say, a month was a little brutal in terms of being away from my daughter, but I think mommy sabbaticals are amazing. and I think it was really good for me to have a break because I was basically with her. Well, the first 3 months I was basically with her, you know, 24/7 because I opted to not go back. I didn't work for 3 months. And then when I did go back to work, I would then be with her every evening. And so, I really wasn't getting like a break. And so it was kind of amazing to have that break and to have some perspective and like, the stakes didn't feel as high, and I got a little perspective about being a mom from being away, which I think was really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get back to that, but I want to like talk about like what you noticed culturally different, like cultural differences between here and there, and it seems like that started off like right away. You flew LL to get there, and so what was that experience like, and then your arrival there and like the first couple of days.
Okay, so LL was really intense. It felt like an interrogation when I first got to the airport. I don't even know, 20-25 minutes, this woman was asking me questions, and she went and checked on things and then would come back. And then basically she told me that I had, and she asked me questions like, what was my daughter's name? What holidays do I celebrate? And honestly, there was a part of me in the back of my mind was like, isn't it illegal to ask these questions? Because it's like, I don't, and then she told me, oh, you're gonna have to go to the special room in the back after you go through security. So then I went through security, and when I went through security, I had special gluten-free food for the plane, and they like bomb checked all my food. And so I was delayed in that security line, and then I had to go to the special security line in the back, and then they took all of my stuff and scrutinized it again. And then when I finally got out of there, they were already boarding the plane, So I was a little panicked, like, oh, was I going to get my backpack in the overhead? And I was able to, but it was intense. And I feel bad for people that, constantly get profiled, because how miserable is that? I mean, this was an inconvenience for me coming and going, but there's some people that have to deal with that all the time, and that just kind of breaks my heart for them. Cultural differences. People in Israel are really in your business.
What's an example of that?
A good example would be I went to all-female swim at the pool, and I didn't have a swim cap. You're supposed to have a swim cap. But I had put my hair on top of my head, and I talked to the lifeguard, and he said it was fine. I get in the water, and then this woman comes after me in Hebrew, talking, and I say, lo ivrit, I don't speak Hebrew. Then she starts speaking to me in French. I'm like, no parle français. Then she starts speaking to me in English, and she said, you need a swim cap, you can't be here. And I said, I've already spoken to the lifeguard, and I have permission to be in the pool. And she said, oh, okay. And then she went away. But the whole rest of the time, all of the women were staring at me. And I could not tell you if they were staring at me in like a judgmental, mean way, or if it was just curiosity. I don't know, because one thing that Israelis have is this very like kind of flat, stoic expression. Like people don't walk down the street and smile at one another. Like in New York, even today coming here, like people will smile and say hi or whatever. People say New Yorkers aren't friendly. I think New Yorkers are actually very friendly, especially after coming from Israel. Well, to be fair, coming from Jerusalem. Because one thing I also encountered from a lot of people was, oh, you're not really experiencing Israel. You're just in Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is its own special, experience compared to the rest of Israel. And I got a little taste of that from going to the north and going to Tel Aviv one day, But my experience was really Jerusalem, so I should be fair by saying Jerusalem. And there are interesting things, like on the bus. There was a couple sitting across from me, and I had actually helped them with directions. This was the couple that I had helped to get to the hospital near my house. And there was a really elderly man falling asleep, and he had a suitcase, and he had the handle up a little bit, and it was falling in my face a little, but he was so old, and he was sleeping, and I didn't have the heart to wake him up. But I was kind of doing this because I was afraid it was going to fall on my face. I did not ask him to, but the guy and the couple across from me wakes the guy up and is like, you're putting it in her face, like in Hebrew, and the guy's like, oh, and puts, but I didn't even ask him to do this, but this is what people will do, They just take the initiative.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would take some getting used to. And I think you talked about, like, there's no, like, personal space.
Oh yeah, there's no personal space. Like one time I was on the bus, and a guy just reached right in front of my face to open or close a window, and I couldn't believe it. It was, it would have considered really rude to do that. And a woman a friend of a friend that I made friends with there, she said she loved reading what I was writing, because to her that would seem like no big deal, because she was used to that,
Right.
Although I will say this, you don't really have personal space, but also there's not the same invasion of space like in New York in terms of on the subway, in terms of when people like really smush next to you and stuff. I think because of the religious part of Jerusalem, people aren't really like on you like that. It's more just when they talk to you, they're going to be a lot closer, or they're going to reach in front of your face, kind of thing.
So how did you like react to things like that, or how did it feel to you?
Well, I have to say the stoic face thing I never got used to. I really missed people smiling. I like warm cultures. I like smiling and warm culture, and people being like, that's what I'm comfortable with. So it was, even after a month, I was not used to it, and I think it would be very hard for me to live somewhere like that. It feels really, I felt very isolated. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm sure I also felt isolated because I didn't speak the language. I lost my train of thought. There was something else I was gonna. Oh, when the guy reached in front of me, I was just kind of taken aback by it, but it didn't really faze me. You know, I got a kick out of the guy that woke up. I felt bad that he woke up the elderly man next to me, but I thought it was really funny because he's like doesn't even know me. He's like waking him up to protect me. Like, it was really funny.
Cool.
Yeah.
And when you so you arrived at the airport in Tel Aviv. You had to take
It's
bus
like a shuttle. It's like a shuttle, and nobody was there for like, I don't even know, like 20 minutes or something. And there was some young people that did speak Hebrew and English, and they're like, oh, they should eventually come. But then what happened is that he did finally come, didn't help us. You know, I'm used to here where the driver will help put your luggage in. There was none of that. We all had to do it ourselves. And then he stuck us in the van, and there was no air conditioning. And I thought, oh, there must not be air conditioning. That's what I was thinking. And so we're all sitting in there and getting hot, and there was a couple women that were getting really annoyed, and they don't leave until like all the seats are filled. And I think there's like maybe 12 seats, and we finally got up to 11, but we were just sitting there, and he would not go. And then when he finally got the last person and comes in, then he comes in, and then he turns the air conditioning on for himself. And then as we were going, there was a woman who tried to give change to another, like she was trying to help out one of the other women who I think she probably knew, I'm not sure, but I think she knew. But then he hadn't given the change back to her. And when she asked for the change, he screamed at her and he was like, I'm gonna drop you off last. I was like, oh my God.
Welcome to Israel.
Yeah, so it was really intense. And I was also, like, I realized, like, I didn't know if it was Bilu or Bilu for my street. So I was, like, thank God I had someone that was helping me. It's like she was helping me, but it was the same woman that he had yelled at, ironically. So I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to end up where I need to end up, and let's see. And I luckily did, but it was a little stressful. And most of the people on the bus did not speak English, actually, so. And the bus driver's English wasn't very good, so.
Mm-hmm. Exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exciting start without a lot of sleep, and right, you said you didn't sleep well.
No, I don't sleep on planes. I'm not a napper. I've never been able to, like, even when my daughter, you know, I have never been able to nap. It actually got to the point where my doctor told me, well, just rest when she rests. So that's what I tried to do when I first had my daughter. But yeah, I don't nap, and I wish I could. I wish it's a skill that is probably at the top of my list that I wish I could do. It would make my life, I think, a lot easier and better, but I've never been one of those people. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you had I think you arrived on a Friday, right? So it was going into Shabbat that night.
Yes, that's correct.
And so I don't know if you went anywhere that first day, or
I did.
Like a couple days
I thought it was really funny because they sent me to the Rockefeller Museum. So here I am coming from New York and I'm going to the Rockefeller Museum. But yeah, I went to the Rockefeller Museum the first Saturday. And then I actually have a friend who used to actually work with me. We shared an office. Oded and his wife and his son came and picked me up at the museum, and then we went to lunch. So that was nice. Yeah.
So how did it go with the public transportation there? You were taking the bus a lot.
I was taking the bus. Sometimes I would take, they have a one train, which I thought was funny because my train by my house is the one train, but it's the only train, is the one train. And so sometimes if you're in the right location, then you will take the one train, which is like a train on tracks. But usually to get most places, you would take all these different buses. And the bus drivers are like the worst drivers I've encountered. Like in all of my travels, the worst bus drivers ever. They're really bad. I mean, the first 2 weeks I was freaked out every time an elderly person got on the bus because they'd often like start going before the person who had sat, and you know, these were really really old people, and I was like, someone's gonna break their hip. It made me very nervous. And one time I stepped into the bus and they started going. They hadn't even shut the door when we started going, and I've seen them do that actually a lot. And yeah, the bus is intense. Yeah.
How did you? Are they difficult to navigate? Like, are there a lot of lines? Was it like?
There are a lot of lines. Once I got to know my bus line, that was like much easier. But a lot of the lines are, a lot of stuff is confusing there, and I don't read Hebrew or speak Hebrew, and the bus stops are in Hebrew. And with Google Maps, sometimes there would be several stops where it would only have it in Hebrew. And if you were lucky, you'd be on a bus where they announce the stops, and you could sort of like figure it out as you go, you know. But there were other times where, for some reason, they didn't have the announcements happening. That would happen a lot, maybe, I don't know, 25% of the time. And so then you really trying to look out and count to see, and there was many times where I would get off like a stop early or a stop late or whatever, because you're like trying to, and you don't speak the language. Often, sometimes what I would do is just ask someone, and we're at this stop right now, where are we right now? Like, you know, and because there are people also that don't, they read Hebrew, but they don't read English, even though they speak English. So that's also an issue. Yeah. And the letters, like, it hadn't dawned on me before I went, like, oh yeah, of course, I'm not going to be able to read, like, you know,
Right.
It's different than the Romance languages where you can, you know, figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
It seemed like you weren't very fazed by the transportation, though. Like, it seemed like you mostly were figuring out where you were going, and like that wasn't like the most stressful thing. Is that true?
I feel like at the beginning, the most stressful thing was actually like navigating and trying to get places. And well, it was a combination of trying to get to the places, and then also my itinerary not being clear about what building I'm going to. There was no cell phone for the person I would be meeting, and like bad directions, like the wrong floor, and so then I'm waiting and I don't have a, you know, like, so it was a combination of the two things that was really frustrating for me at the beginning. I mean, probably if I went back and read the first 2 weeks, it probably is all me complaining about being lost and like waiting for to come into contact with whoever I was meeting up with. Yeah.
Yeah, no, right. No, there were definitely a few times when the instructions were not as good as they should have been. So.
But I loved having the travel blog, because it was so cathartic, because I could because I'm not traveling with anyone, so I don't have anyone to talk to about it. So it was a way to sort of purge everything and say, well, this is what happened, and then let it go. So I actually was really grateful to have that outlet, because that was like very therapeutic for me to have the blog and do that. Yeah,
Nice.
It's actually kind of weird now that I don't have to blog about my life every day. It's kind of strange. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have to keep track of anything anymore.
Right. That's funny. No, yeah, you wrote super regularly, and like that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
With fellows, so it was really great. I mean, it was nice. Like sometimes people get like behind on their writing or whatever, but you did it really regularly, and it felt very fresh, and it was always like, you know, what happened today, and. Yeah. Do you write like on your own? Is like writing part of your life or work?
Yes and no. I recently wrote like a little article for Theater Topics, and I used to dabble in memoir writing, and so I have some essays that I've written. But I don't really consider myself a writer. I always say I'm going to be an empowered actress and write my own material, but I never quite managed to make that happen. But I do enjoy memoir writing, like writing the essays that I've written. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it seemed like you were enjoying the writing part
Yeah.
of it, and even like doing it, you know, after a really long day and late at night
Yeah.
and stuff.
It was, I mean, I really mean, like, it felt therapeutic and like, oh, this is what happened. And I also love that, because I've traveled before, and you mean to write about, but you're too tired, and so you don't make it happen. But I'm like if I have clear instructions and the deadline, then I will be the good student and I will do it. So I loved having that. And then now I have this incredible record of my whole journey, and I can go back and look at it, and I think it'll be interesting to read it in like a year and see, like, I might laugh at myself for something, you know, like I love that I'll have that record for life. Is really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And you were, I mean, like you mentioned, it was, there wasn't someone to like share your experiences with. I mean, you had meetings with people, of course, but like mostly it's a pretty solitary experience, and you're in this unfamiliar place,
and that was very hard for me. I'm an extrovert in terms of the Myers-Briggs type indicator extrovert. I get my energy from other people. So and also there was a time difference for me to talk to my husband or talk to my friends in New York. I was 7 hours ahead, and then for my family in California, I was 10 hours ahead. So I did have a few really great conversations with like my sister, my mom, and my brother-in-law with my sister, and with my husband and the baby. Actually, we video chatted a few times, but often when I wanted to do that, it wasn't possible because of the time change, you know. So it was hard not having that. Like, it was hard to just be by yourself, you know.
Right.
I think what did save me though was having those one-on-one meetings with people, because at least I was having that interaction. I think if I was there and all I was doing was I don't know, going to classes or something like where you're not meeting one-on-one with people, I think it would have been really hard for me. I think I might have gotten depressed because I need that interaction. Yeah. You know? And I think having those one-on-one meetings really saved me. And I did meet some really like incredible people. I mean, Yossi, the community organizer, I thought he knew somebody and that's why he was meeting with me. He didn't know anybody at Cube Arts. They randomly found him and he agreed to meet with me, and then he spent the whole morning with me, you know, and then took me to the bus stop and waited for me with the bus, and, you know, I mean, just very generous.
What was your meeting like with him?
So he was late. I can't remember what was. Maybe he was just, or maybe he messed it up in his calendar. I can't keep track of all the different lateness stuff. But he showed up and he was like, oh, Lil, I want to show you around. And I actually had to go get my laundry later. So I had my big empty suitcase. So we actually went to his house, which of course was many flights of stairs up, and he carried my suitcase for me, and we left it at his apartment, and then we went around, and then he showed me the park. Well, he showed me the huge park that the students from the university and his community and his organizing like made this amazing park happen in the neighborhood. Like, I can't even, it's like incredible park. And then like the High Line we have here, they actually have a similar thing. It's not up high, but it's the old railroad tracks, and they made it this really nice like wood, and it's this walkway, and you can walk all the way through Jerusalem on it. And then it has like at some stops there'll be like the free book thing, or there's different art things at different, and then he showed me there was a place where they had put up a wall, and there was a playground on the other side, so it was keeping the kids from going to the playground. And they contacted the city and they wouldn't do anything about it. So then the students had this idea, and they did this short film about how the children like rise up, and, you know, long story short, they got a lot of media coverage, and then the wall came down. They made stairs, and they made a handicap ramp, and he was so inspirational with all of his community organizing, and also the fact that these students at the college really were instrumental in helping them make all this stuff happen. And they only became aware. Originally, they were trying to build a big like highway or something behind the house, and that's when and the reason they found out was because there was a community and arts activism and arts class at the university, and their assignment was you need to find a community and let them know what the city is planning to do to their neighborhood. And because those students did that and pick that neighborhood, that they were able to avoid getting that road, they were able to get this gorgeous park, they were able to, so it's just, it was very inspirational, because sometimes you feel like, oh, what's the point, nothing's gonna happen, but it really showed that, oh, no, things can get done. And they didn't have a lawyer, it's just people from the community and the students. But they had so much,
It sounds like I know you got to a lot of different neighborhoods in Jerusalem. Like, how much of the city do you feel like you ended up seeing? And it's not that big either, right?
Yeah, I think I saw most of it. I can't tell you, oh, this is the name of this neighborhood and this is the name of that neighborhood. But I think because I was going to so many different areas of the city, I think I ended up seeing most of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and you wrote about some of your impressions of like the very different neighborhoods. Like some are like very religious, and we should talk about like the modesty, dress, like requirements. That was like a really big part of your experience.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that now.
So my neighborhood, Old Katlan, you feel like you're in the suburbs. You don't feel like you're in the city. First of all, it's very quiet. There's not much happening. The bodega up the block closes at 7 every day. Mm-hmm. There were no restaurants right nearby me. There was one maybe we'd call it like 4 blocks away, I guess. But all it really had was cheese. It was kind of weird. I think maybe they had salads too. But that was actually where I bought my first bag of milk ever, was at that place. Uh-huh. And my neighborhood had a big hospital half a block away, but it also had half a block away the local park. But it was weird for me because I'm a city girl, and it was just very quiet. And when I came, I had mentioned to the people at Cube Art Studios that I don't really feel safe because I come home at night and there's nobody on the street, and it's creeps me out. And they started laughing because they said it's we picked this neighborhood because it's one of the safest areas. And it's funny because I used to live in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, which is a really bad neighborhood, but I never felt unsafe because there were people around. I guess for me, in my experience, because my experience is I'm a city person, I'm used to people being around. Even in my neighborhood now, even late at night, there are always people around and out and about. So for me, when there's no one out and you're walking through a park late at night, this is with the stuff of horror movies. So in my mind, I'm I didn't feel comfortable. So it's just interesting that, yeah.
And in that neighborhood, it was it's not super religious. You could.
It's pretty.
Kind of wear what you wanted, or
I would say it's medium. I definitely felt there were 2 times that 2 guys said something to me, and I think they were not nice. And it was both when I was showing my arms. There was a lot of ultra orthodox that would be on the bus or and so not a lot, but a decent amount. And you would get looks, or you would get Usually in my neighborhood, I would at least have a short sleeve or a long sleeve, just so I wouldn't have to deal with any drama. There were a few days towards the end that I was just so fed up with all the modesty and everything that I was just being super rebellious, and I would wear no sleeves, but I never actually wore anything above the knee. I didn't feel comfortable there doing that. And there were definitely, I didn't come super prepared because I thought, I only need modesty for a few things. But there were so many things and so many areas I was going where you really needed to be covered. If you're walking in the old city, you really should be covered. I even had a long dress on but I had no sleeves, but I had put a scarf over. but not really, like it was covering, but I would get looks, you know. And also I was there during Ramadan, so that's actually when people dress more conservatively as well. So you're getting it from everybody, not just from the Jewish people that are super, you know, so conservative. So, yeah.
How did that experience of having to be so aware of how you dressed, like, how did that, or what was your experience of like of gender roles and assumptions, and how did that kind of thing feel different there, and what were you?
Well, I have to say, as a feminist, I resented having to cover. I did resent that. I try to be respectful for people in their religion. So if I'm walking into a holy place, okay, I'll cover. But I didn't like that I felt uncomfortable just walking down the street, that I couldn't wear what I wanted to wear. I didn't like that at all. I felt very resentful about that, especially because it was so hot, and then you're having to cover, and so I was very resentful of that. I did it, but I didn't like it. And it's funny because I always have wanted to go to Egypt, and now I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to Egypt, because do I really want to be covered all the time? Like, I don't know, like it really, it taints your experience. And it's interesting because one of the women that I met with, does live in a settlement and in a conservative religious community, and she was talking about her dilemma with, she didn't want to have to tell her daughter that she should cover, because your reason you have to cover is because the men are too tempted. And she's like, I don't like that, I don't want to tell her that. But that's actually how they teach them, is, oh, you have to cover because for the men. So it's like you have to do it for them, like you're existing for the man. Like that whole thing I have a huge problem with. And it makes me sad for the girls growing up in that, you know.
Of the women that you met with, did you, I mean, of course everybody's different and coming from a different background and situation, but what was your sense of like their understanding of gender compared to yours?
Well, I will say, so you know, I went to a Shabbat dinner and Iftar dinner, and at both dinners it was, you know, the woman does the cooking, the man doesn't cook, you know what I mean? Like there's very traditional gender roles like that. I do think though men actually are, from the men that I saw, are more involved in helping with the kids than here, which I think is interesting. And even boys, you would see older brothers with their younger siblings with strollers on the bus, and you don't really, I don't see that a lot here. So, you know, I don't know, we didn't really talk about that with the different people that I met so much. I mean, in Mea Sherim, they have different lines. So you'll go to like a cafe or a restaurant, and there's a line for men and there's a line for women. There's a different line to wait in. And I didn't experience this, but so they're trying to, some of the ultra-conservative people are trying to implement segregation on the buses again, so the women should go to the back and the men should be in the front. And that in some neighborhoods, even though it's not the law, they're already doing it. So that's, yeah. And, you know, when we went to the synagogue, the women are segregated on this side and the men are up there. And one of the women that I met with, she actually is part of this growing community where they sit separate, but they don't do Shabbat with the rabbi, and they don't go to the synagogue. They do it in their homes, and they let the men and women look at each other while they're doing it, and they also let the women say their prayers, which is, you know, very radical. So there are people that are still trying to maintain the religion, but modernize it, make it a little more equal, you know.
Right. You definitely mentioned in your writing that how omnipresent religion was, which is not
Yes.
a surprise
Yes.
there. And you went to 2 or 3 different Shabbat services.
Yeah, I mean, the one at First Station was just really people singing. I didn't, to me, and maybe that's just my own experience of what I've been, when I've experienced things that were like religious services, but to me it didn't feel like a religious service. It just felt like a kind of a boring concert. It was, and then the synagogue I went to in Yael's neighborhood was very progressive for a synagogue in terms of their you don't have to cover your head, you don't have to you don't really have to worry so much about what you're wearing. It was much more like a hippie vibe, and it was kind of like what we would consider like a church basement kind of thing. It wasn't some grand synagogue, do you know what I'm saying? And people were very like relaxed with, like, kids were running in and running out during the service, and like some women would go out and be with their kids out there and then come back in. I danced with the women during the service, and it was more of a chill vibe than I was expecting,
Does she live on a kibbutz, or what's
It's
her
not a
community
kibbutz,
like?
it's a low-income housing project, but it's not like a project like you would think of here. Like, I wouldn't go there and say, oh, this is a housing project, where, here you go, oh, that's a housing project, And then what happens is they get volunteers, and they have really built up the community and the neighborhood, and everybody lives among everyone, and it's really everyone's very supportive of each other, and the kids like run over to each other's houses all the time. It's a very safe community, and I mean, probably a really wonderful place to raise kids, I'm guessing, because of the interaction and the way I saw the women with each other and the kids, and I wrote about it in my blog, like, just even the relationship of Yael and her husband, the love you could feel between the two of them, and how they respected one another, and how they talked to one another, and then how they interacted with their kids was actually really beautiful. Yeah.
It's going to be great to have Yael is going to be a fellow here, arriving next week. Actually.
She's going to miss her 5 kids and her husband. I think it's going to be really hard for her. Yeah, but it'll probably be really good for her. I mean, I do believe now I'm like a full-fledged fan of mommy sabbaticals. I think it's a good thing.
You also mentioned how, or I think in your last post when you were sort of reviewing all your impressions, you said that the people are like freer or less anxious about babies, or I forget exactly.
Yeah, so like I think here, first of all, it kind of annoys me that everyone's always like, well, you have to get a babysitter. Like, you couldn't possibly bring your kid to like a party or something, which I think is really strange. Why can't you? Because I remember when I grew up, like, we would go to dinner parties, and then the kids would go in the other room and fall asleep or watch a movie or whatever. Like, why are people paying all this money for babysitters if they're just going to meet up with their friends? And I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes I think you need a break and you should get a babysitter, but I think, like, if a baby cries here, people are like, oh my God, a baby's crying. Where I feel like there, it's like, the baby's crying, let's try to comfort the baby. Like, it's much more chill, it is what it is, oh, this is part of life. Or here, I think there's a, oh, the baby's crying kind of thing. Yeah.
Do you think like that's gonna, has that shifted your ideas about, or your sense of parenting?
Well, I'm a first-time parent, so I think, like, there's always the joke, like, the first kid, you're so careful with, and you're so attentive with, and I think I definitely have, like, that first-time mom thing, but I also have, like, definite ideas about parenting, and I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, let the baby cry. Like, that's not how I feel at all, that you should, I mean, when they're 2 and they're having a temper tantrum, like, that's another story, but when they're, like, still a baby, I don't believe we aren't even so far doing the Ferber method. You know, like I don't really believe in just letting the baby cry. It's not really my MO at all. But I think like since I came back, because I've had a little more perspective, I think I'm a little more relaxed about, okay, I'm not gonna panic. She's up, it's 6 a.m, I didn't get much sleep, and c'est la vie, just gotta go on with my day, you know? Like, I'm more like, I gotta just roll with the punches, you know? I think I have a little more of that right now.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm definitely more, how can I say this? I mean, it's also, to be fair, I'm not working right now. I'm not teaching classes right now. So I have a soft landing, but I feel like I'm better at just being still, I think, from being there.
Say more about that.
So like, I'm one of those people that's always like making lists in my head and like, what do I have to do next? And like, it's like go, like such the New Yorker, right? And I feel like since I've gotten back, I'm less of that, and I think in a good way. I have less of that energy. Now let's hope I can maintain it, because also when school starts, that's a whole other thing, you know. Yeah.
One of the activities I wanted to ask you about was the tour, Amin tour.
Yeah.
In East Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It sounded like that was super interesting.
It was really interesting. It was so much information. Like, I don't think I retained a lot of it, because there's so much stuff they're telling you, and it's like 4 hours straight. But it was really interesting, and there were things I didn't know that I learned, you know, that I love that when I learn new things, you know, so,
Just sort of about the politics of like.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how many settlements were in violation of international law. Like, I didn't really realize that. And also, you know, we're calling a settlement, like, nobody would know it's a settlement. You just think it's another neighborhood. And you know, and some of the really horrible things that that the Palestinians have been put through, and you know, just even the different, I already knew this, but like the separation wall versus the apartheid wall, and like how the Israelis and the Palestinians even call the wall different things. You know, this is just like the heart of the conflict, right? You can't agree on anything, not even the name of the wall, right? You know, and I totally get both sides, and I think it's such a sad situation. It's really sad.
Yeah. How aware of the political situation there were you in your day-to-day experience?
I mean, I don't think I had like and I still don't think I have a super deep like understanding of it, but I you know, I essentially knew what it was about, and you know, yeah.
Like, as you're moving through the city and doing your activities, probably depends like exactly where you were and stuff, or like, or did it feel like sometimes I had the impression that it could feel like you wouldn't necessarily be very aware of that, like if you're in Jewish neighborhoods and
right. I don't think you are super aware of it as you're walking. Jerusalem is fairly safe. You're aware of it if you're other places, you know. As a tourist, I'm saying. I think if you are living in Jerusalem, but then you're working in Ramallah, you're very aware of it, because you're having to cross checkpoints every day, and you have to deal with all of that drama every day. You know, that's a different experience. You know. Yeah.
So you did go one day to Ramallah.
Yes.
In the West Bank.
Yeah.
And you wrote a little bit about that, but I'm curious to hear more about the experience, like of going through whatever security there was, or.
So going in was like nothing. And actually, we were very lucky coming back because it was Monday. We really didn't have much traffic. I mean, I've had more issues crossing the Mexican California border than when we came back. But it was an unusual day and time that we were just lucky. I didn't feel unsafe because of where we were. It was fine, you know. It was just interesting because we went to her university. You know, I teach at a university, so like there's that, and the politics where she wants a full-time position and the chair wants to give her a full-time position, but the committee said no because they want to hire somebody else, and so like it felt very much like my life in a way when we were at the university, and then we were watching we saw a student show that was there. It was an art show, and then at my school we'd be seeing like a play, but it's just like very similar experiences and that. And then, we went to a hole in the wall to have lunch that was delicious. It was, because everywhere you go, everyone's like, oh, this place has the best hummus. No, this place has the best, But like, to me, I'm not a huge hummus fan, which is like sacrilegious to say there. But this was the best that I had the whole time I'd been there. It was very good, and Rula was a trip because she is like the mayor. Like everywhere we went, everybody knew her and talked to her. And everyone's her former student. The director of the cultural center was her former student, and then another guy that worked there was her former student. So it was nice to have like access to these things too. The cultural center was actually. The exhibit wasn't going to open till the next day, and they let us see it ahead of time because they knew her. They let us see the famous poet's, room and desk. The public wasn't allowed to see. So yeah, it was interesting.
How did both there and in Jerusalem? What was it like when people found out you were American? Like, what kinds of reactions did you get, or what was your sense?
When I was in Palestine, people were like very friendly and like, hi, blah, blah, blah. But there wasn't much like deep conversation beyond that. And often, even if they spoke English, then they would go back to speaking Arabic with Rula. So there was a lot of conversations there I was left out of. So then I would just go do my thing. Like I actually ended up volunteering at the hospital because we had time to kill. And I don't feel like I don't feel like there was discrimination against me because I was American or enthusiasm. I don't feel like either way. I did. Amanda and I talked briefly about Trump, and she was saying how she liked what he did for them, but she doesn't like him otherwise. Whereas her cousin, I guess he was a big Trump fan on Facebook, and she said, well, I'm not a fan of him, but I love you to him. Like they had this little thing. So when I met with Marcel, I purposely did not bring up Trump because I said I wouldn't want to get into that with him. But it also made me very sad because I'm like, here you are, a survivor, and you don't really have empathy for what's happening here. And that makes me sad, And Yad Vashem, that place killed me. Oh my God, that place killed me.
Right, you wrote about having very experience.
And I was like, I couldn't believe, because it wasn't just, there was tourists there. It wasn't just Israeli people who are used to it and, have processed this pain forever and have their family been killed off and all, like it wasn't, that wasn't just the people that were there. There were tourists there, people from all over the world. And nobody was crying. I thought it was so strange. I thought it was so strange. It was like they were going to the Met or something, Felt, and I know everybody processes differently and whatever, but I thought this is a place where you would think you'd see one other person cry.
Yeah.
It was very weird for me. I don't know.
Had you been to a Holocaust museum before?
Holocaust museum? No, I don't think so. I think I've been to like maybe little exhibits about, but not like an actual dedicated museum, no. Actually, maybe I went to the one in DC. When did that one open?
Maybe early 90s? Exactly.
I might have gone to that like years ago. Yeah, I mean, and I didn't really learn anything new there. I mean, I learned about the Vans. I didn't know about the Vans. But it was more just like remembering all the books, all the movies I've seen, all, you know, like, and then just, you know, like seeing some of the emaciated people. It reminded me of like Ethiopia and the famine, you know, like how they're just starving, you know. Very sad.
Did you experience like Holocaust memory anywhere else in the city, or did it feel like really confined, or as far as you experienced it, confined to Yad Vashem? Or did it come up in conversation? How much?
Well, that night, Yael's husband asked me about my day, and I said, well, it was kind of intense because this is what I did today. And they were curious. They were like, oh, did you not know about this? And I was like, no, of course I knew about this. Like, I'm actually in the U.S. That's one thing that we are very good about educating. For me, I was very well educated about the Holocaust growing up. Like, probably overeducated, honestly. Like, I feel like maybe I was too young when I learned about it. Because I remember having nightmares when I was, like, little about it. But no, other than that, it didn't really come up unless it was, like, an educational format for something. Or people talking about, oh, in response to this is why we had to establish the state of Israel. Or, you know, like, it would be more talked about in, like, a historical context.
And did that, for example, come up much? Like about why Israel existed? Like were people wanting to talk with you about that?
Not really. It was more like I'd see it in the documentary that I saw, or reading about it at a museum. It was more that. I did when I met with Pua, her experiences about the 48 war. But not really about she didn't even mention the Holocaust. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One of the things we incorporated into the program is therapy, which I think you did 3 times.
I did 3 times because Tavir thought it was like every other week. And so I asked, and at my first meeting at Cube Art Studio, I said, I'm just curious because I thought I was supposed to go every week. And then he said to him, oh yeah, she's supposed to go every week. And I said, it's fine, like I don't need it, but I just was curious. And then they did put it for me every week after that.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
How was that? I mean, you share whatever you want about it, but how?
I mean, honestly, it was fine. It wasn't really necessary for me. Like, it was great. I caught her up on what was going on with me, and like, she's from New York, so she kind of like knew my experience in terms of like being new, and so it was like a good place to like vent about things at the beginning when I was a little frustrated. But honestly, like the last 2 times I went, it was like, okay, I guess I have to go. But there was a part of me that was like, oh, I'd rather be doing something else. Like, I'm in Jerusalem. Like, I don't really need to go to therapy. Like, let me go do this other museum, or let me go do, So there was a part of me that was like, I don't want to go. But once I was there, she was great, and like, it was fine. But I don't feel like I had any like major epiphanies or like anything like that. But
that's interesting. I was going to ask about your sense of how your experience there shifted over the course of the month, because from our perspective, it did seem like talking with you and reading what you were writing, like it seemed like definitely there was a shift as time went on and things started to feel easier and like not so stressful and enjoyable even.
Yeah.
Like, what's your sense of that change over the course of the month?
Well, I think once I was figuring out where I was going, like having more success with that, and then also having clear instructions about once I got to the places that I was going, that made it like a million times better. Because for me, like one of my really big pet peeves is like, don't waste my time, and that I felt like my time was being wasted when I would go somewhere and the thing that I'm supposed to be doing I couldn't be doing because I couldn't get in contact with the person, or there was like not good instructions about where I'm supposed to be meeting this person, or and there was a few times where people were late, which I also was annoyed about. Like that's the thing that I have where, supposedly in Israel, it's supposed to be very relaxed about time and like things aren't supposed to start on time. But I feel like most like events I went to did actually start on time. Like no events that I went to started late. So it might just be like the people are relaxed about the time.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you think, so you're an actor, you're, often our fellowship is our fellows are visual artists.
Yeah.
So your experience is a little bit different, but in general, I mean, in principle, it's the same. You're sort of taking a break from your regular work for a month, and being in this new and unfamiliar context. How are you feeling now that you're back, and of course you're sort of on summer break still, but like as you look ahead to like getting back into work, like do you have any initial sense of being in a different place, or like approaching things differently, or then that may well unfold over time?
So I don't know. I will say this, one thing that I'm very jealous of is that artists there really support one another. And that could totally be happening here, but for me as an actor, I don't feel like actors super support one another. Like when Dan gave me a tour of a neighborhood, he made going to 2 galleries part of that tour because he really wanted to go support these 2 artists that were at the 2 galleries, I just feel like there's a really great sense of community and people seeing each other's work and really supporting one another, and I think that's really like a beautiful thing. And one thing that I am envious of that I feel like a lot of people there have is they have their community, and now often it's based around a religion, but that there is this sense of like you have this great community, where I feel like as a new mom I definitely feel I was feeling a lack of community when I left. And like one thing in my mind is like, how do I build myself into community that's not necessarily like an organized religion type of thing? And even when I was there, I actually looked into like my the yoga studio I used to go to has like a mommy and me support group. And then of course the class isn't running, like they had to cancel it because they didn't have enough people. Like how do you create community for yourself socially, and then also how do you really create community for yourself as an artist, especially when you're an actor, without having to like create your own theater company and like fundraise and produce and everything. And maybe that's what you have to do. I don't know. I have to like think about that more. But as an actor, you often feel disempowered because you don't have control of your casting. You're going out, you're putting your heart and soul out there, and then you're lucky enough to get cast or not. And it's frustrating. And for me, it's super frustrating lately because I need it for tenure. I need like a good show for tenure, but I can't, and I'm a union actor. So I can't do a lot of off stuff because I'm union, but also I can't rehearse and do some of the more professional stuff because I have to teach, and I have to be teaching during the day, so I can't even go to auditions during the day. I can't even really have an agent because you have to be able to go to auditions during the day. But at the same time, for tenure, I need to have work, so there's that, and maybe the answer is I just have to like bite the bullet and produce my own stuff, which I'm not really interested in producing. I'm really interested in just doing the work, but maybe in order to get to do the work, you gotta just produce it, Yeah.
Those are definitely some interesting, like, questions that,
Yeah.
were those things that were on your mind before, or?
They were, but you know, when watching the other artists there as they interact with each other, I was noticing that. Well, no, it's also kind of when you're a visual artist, you can just do your own. You have your own studio. You can create your work, and you're good. Whereas an actor, it doesn't apply that way. I mean, you have to get the part, and then you create and do that work. But you have to get the part. And you can create work, but then that means you need to work on your playwriting skills, or create a one-person show, or like it's not really your discipline. You're having to venture into something else. Yeah, and I don't know what the answer is. We'll see.
Yeah. We'll be following up with you. I think over the course of the year with some questionnaire evaluations.
Yeah.
For 1 month and 6 months and 12 months to sort of get a sense of how those questions and other questions unfold, and how the fellowship starts you integrate it into your life and stuff like that. Is there anything that you did as part of the fellowship that anything new that you think you might incorporate into your life back here?
I think not necessarily a specific activity, but I think I am less shy now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I was sort of forced to have to put myself out there a lot.
Yeah.
And for survival, just for getting directions and stuff, but also I was I don't want to be alone this whole fellowship. So at my hummus making class, I made friends with this guy, and then he was really into the culture of Jerusalem and wanting to do stuff. So he actually accompanied me to the Cinematheque both times that I went. Well, I went more than 2 times, but he came with me twice to see the films together, and then it was so much more enjoyable because then afterwards we could discuss the films, and I loved that, and I really did take the initiative to be hey, here's my number, how long are you here, and putting myself out there. And I did that a lot, and just so I'd have a better time. When I went to the Dead Sea and Masada, I adopted myself into this family for the day and hung out with them, and they were lovely people. And then on the trip to the north, I also met a lovely woman as well, and totally bonded with her for the day. So I on purpose made friends with people so that I would have a better time with whatever activity I was doing. And normally I'm more shy and I don't approach strangers. It's not usually my thing. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it could be definitely a useful skill or attribute for your work.
Well, for sure. It's always better not to be shy in our culture.
Yeah.
And I did, I have done deep water running before, but I have never done aqua size before. And that was actually really cool and good for my knee. So I am going to look into to see if we have that here. I don't actually know if we do. I know we have the deep water running. I've done that before. But the aqua size was actually a little more engaging, and you do different motions than just the deep water running stuff. So it was a little more interesting. So that I might look into.
Yeah.
I don't think there was anything else that I would really pursue. I mean, I love volunteering, but also with the way my crazy New York life is and being a mom and stuff, I'm I don't really know how I would make time to do that. But that it is fulfilling to do that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I got the most out of doing it the day that I wasn't asked to do it, when I did it on my own.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right. Suddenly you were volunteering.
Yeah.
And that was in Ramallah, right?
That was in East Jerusalem. Yeah, that was at the hospital where Arula's friend was getting chemo. So,
right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, did you have any other thoughts you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, just thank you for this experience.
You're so welcome. Yeah, you were super like engaged and energetic and a good sport at times when like things inevitably there are inevitably, you know, moments that don't go as planned, which is sort of part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we enjoyed like following along your experience, and it's great to catch up with you now, and we'll look forward to hearing more over this year. So thanks, Natasha.
Thank you.